So you bought the candles, you set the intention, you did the ritual, you said the incantation just right, and crickets. Nothing happened. And I don't mean lightning didn't come down from the sky right there in that moment. I mean, it's been weeks and nothing happened. What happened to that magic? Why did that spell not activate and work? I'm Katrina Rasbold. I've been a practicing witch for more than 40 years, and I am today going to take you into that discussion of the mechanics and the biology of belief and magic. So today we're not talking about herbs, we're not talking about color correspondences or what the stones do. Today we're going to talk about the real practical reasons why some spells just don't land. And it's not always what you think it's going to be. So let's get started. See, I've got it. There we go. I had to find the advance. There we go. So you did it all. Everything's perfect. We've all been there. It's happened to everybody. It's not just you. It doesn't mean you're an ineffective witch. It just means for one of several reasons, potentially, the spell didn't land. But why? We have to consider that magic is a partnership between your internal energies, the power that you have manifest in your body, which is that biology part of your belief and your intention, with deity and with factors going on in the external world. And a lot of people, when they're working magic, they don't bring the external world into that magical process because they're saying, what I'm doing is supernatural. It's beyond the natural world. And so I'm not going to include the natural world. And that is a huge mistake because magic is one of the most natural things you can do. And it's an integral part of the natural world. And so you've got to bring into play the things that are happening around you and out there in the world. So if any of those three factors fall down, if the connection with your internal energy or your connection to deity or something going on with your connection to the outside world gets frayed or is weak, then the spell is going to slow down and possibly stall. We need exemplary connection and forceful flow of energy through all three of those aspects of life. Now, in our book, Energy Magic, my husband Eric and I coined the phrase biouniversal energy. And this means your biology, your bioenergy that is inherent to you, the part of you that when this soul's journey finishes in this body and this body passes away, it's the part that's gone. Your personal energy. And universal is the universal energy, meaning not only your relationship with whatever you consider to be divine, God, goddess, creator, I don't care, whatever that divine figure is for you, as well as the connection to nature and the outside world, which is seen as a part of that divine connection. So biouniversal energy is what we're talking about here. And again, if any of those three break down, we see a delay or a complete misstep on the spell so that it doesn't quite work. Now that's our beginning touch on it. So one of the first downfalls that people get into when they're working to manifest, or even when they're working to banish, is they don't always know exactly what it is that they want. They think that they do. And remember, we've talked in other classes about how magic comes from a feeling. Now, that is the first initial spark of any magical work you're going to do. It comes from a feeling that you have, an emotion. It then moves forward from emotion into intention. Prior to that, it becomes just the feeling. So we got the feeling, we've got the intent or the emotion, the feeling that you're feeling. And then we move into the intention, and then we move into the actual acting out of the spell or the production of the spell work. So that's our little skip and jump to get to where we're going. So when I say that people don't always know what they want, a lot of times their life is so screwed up or they're just so depressed that they will manifest something like, I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy. And that is so nebulous. You know, that involves a checklist of things that would potentially make you happy and forces the universe to go through and try all of these different moving parts, just try to see if it can get you happy. And happy is a destination. It's not really a permanent place, because happy implies a temporary thing, a temporary experience. So when we're looking at, I want to be happy, there's usually a set of conditions behind that we need to fulfill. So happy is just too vague. And that's your point. Avoid vague intentions. You want to be kind of specific about what you want. You don't have to be specific about how it happens, but you want to be specific about what you want. And something like, I want more money, is nebulous. If you do spell work and your whole intention is, I'm going to manifest more money, and you find a quarter on the ground the next day, you may not register that as, well, the spell worked, there's more money. You have to get a little bit more specific than that. And it's kind of like using a GPS. If you type into the GPS, I just want to go somewhere fun, take me somewhere fun, the GPS doesn't know what to do. It doesn't have a plan. If it's really sort of AI-ish, it might say, well, most people like to do this, so let's do this. But we have to spend our energy on investing in what we know that we need, rather than something ambiguous like more money or someplace fun. So narrow your goal down to one sentence if you can. Now, that's not to say you can only want one thing, but for your specific spell work, give it one sentence. And you can say something like, I need or want $5,000 by the end of October. You do that in saying, I want abundance and prosperity, which is very nebulous and will have different definitions according to different people. Now, here's where this gets tricky. When you're saying something like, I want $5,000 or I want a $5,000 raise by the end of October, however you want to phrase it up, there's a couple of things you have to remember. One, the universal side of that bio-universal energy, the nature that's out there, the universe as far as God, goddess, creator, divine figures, they don't give a crap about our human calendar. That's a human construction. And so they're not really looking at what October means. That energy is looking at fulfillment of a specific goal as soon as possible. Now, the human side of you, the bio side of you, does know what October is. And so that part of the composite will be pushing toward October. The rest of it might have other ideas. And you have to think about things like, if I got offered a $5,000 a year raise on the 3rd of November, is that spell a failure because it came 3 or 4 days late? Probably not. So be careful about setting those dates, because those are the man-made figures. You also have to think, so I'm asking for a $5,000 raise. What if your boss was thinking, boy, that person really deserves a $6,000 raise? I'm going to start them at 5, just because they got wind of that energy. So sometimes setting specific numbers and specific dates can get a little bit dicey. However, it does give the magic a container in which to work. So what you do is you fix that by saying, I want a $5,000 a year raise by October, or the better, or something better, or something around this, something like this. But this is the image. This is the icon for the folder on the desktop of what I want. So Yes, get specific, but don't get too specific to the point that you don't leave wiggle room for the parts of this composite of energy that don't care about the calendar or about specific numbers. There is an intent and a flow that comes with this sort of spell work that's going to fuel what you're doing. Another thing that is very common for why spell work doesn't land is because you didn't do enough work. You didn't get enough energy to flow for what needs to happen for that spell to occur or that fulfillment of that manifestation. So if you think about your goal for your spell work, each goal has a very specific energy load that you have to reach or it's not going to happen. Now, I sort of think this is like if you have a refrigerator, there's a specific amount of electricity that has to flow to that refrigerator for it to turn on and that light to come open when you open the door. Anything less than that is not going to cause that refrigerator to turn on. You can't run a refrigerator on 4 AA batteries. You're going to have something bigger. And the thing is, you never know how much energy a spell is going to need because there could be unseen factors, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But you just don't know how much energy it's going to need. So you just keep pushing energy toward it until you get what you want. And sometimes that takes a while. Now, here's a consideration. If you're doing magical work to change something very specific to you, I want to be healthier. I want to have greater clarity. I want to have a better connection to my divine figure, something that just involves you. That magic's going to flow a lot faster than magic that involves the cooperation of other people. So if you're saying, I want my soulmate to come to me by the end of October, that first of all implies a soulmate, which means there is a person or one of 2 or 3 people out there that's meant to be your partner in life. And they were therefore meant to meet you at a certain time. And if you're speeding that up by saying, nope, I'm not waiting, I want it by October, the universe has to start rearranging that other person's life, has to get that other person on board with the idea of getting to wherever they're going to meet you faster, in addition to setting up your life to create the avenue for that intersection of those 2 lives earlier than scheduled. It's having to manage 2 separate lives, which is a lot. It's not as simple as, oh, just bring me my soulmate faster than I intended it to happen. So if you have a soulmate, the contract is likely that you're supposed to meet that soulmate at some point. However, I met my soulmate when I was 35 years old. So when you meet your soulmate, who knows when that would be? So it's going to take a lot more energy to affect 2 people's lives than one. If you have a very specific job that you want and you know this is the job you have to have, you're not just getting yourself into the job and getting yourself ready for the job, promoting yourself for the job. You're also having to influence the hiring body that would be bringing you on board. You're having to also manage all of the other people who are in line for that job. So you aren't just managing you. And that's the whole point of the energy load, is you don't ever know how much energy is going to be required to get that outcome to happen. So magic isn't just about thinking about it. It's not just about intention. Remember, I gave you that other part. It's action. It's feeling the energy, letting the energy flow through you and pushing it out to the goal. So that biology aspect of what you're doing is where you're connecting to the physical part of your process, but also to the divine and the metaphysical part of your process. So that being the case, If you have something going on with you that's reducing your energy, you're not going to get as much energy out to the goal. So if you're sick, if you're exhausted, if you're distracted, if you're really emotionally drained and emotionally fraught, those are all things that are going to keep you from being able to push good energy toward the goal, because your battery is simply too low to get enough energy to the spell to make it happen. So if you're working the spell, even as a novice, you should feel the flow of energy leaving you and going into the candle or going into the ritual production, whatever you're doing. And you will probably feel a little bit of a catch or a switch as you're doing the work that tells you that it took, that it connected with the goal. And if you don't feel anything, it's real possible you're not generating enough juice to get that refrigerator to light up. So that's number 2 for why it may not have worked. Not enough energy went into the spell to hit that energy load and light up the light bulb. Remember, our first one was that your intentions were too vague. They weren't specific enough. Let's see what our next one is. That is about what's working against you. Now, I use this example all the time, and people probably get tired of hearing it, but it's so appropriate. When you do spell work, imagine that you have a very heavy box and you have to push it from one end of a warehouse to the other end of the warehouse. Now, if that floor is smooth as silk and that box is moderately heavy, you can push and push and push and push, and success depends on you getting to the other side of that warehouse, and you probably will. However, think about some of the extraneous analogies for that. If you have 2 broken legs, if you're just exhausted, if the floor of that warehouse is all ragged and uneven, if it slopes uphill a little bit, if somebody is pushing back on the box, if somebody comes along and says, hey, let me help you push that box, and helps you push, all of those things are mitigating factors that are going to change how quickly you're going to get that box across the floor. And it's the same thing with magic. If you have multiple people working on your goal together, you're going to get there faster. If you're in really great spirits and really good place and you've got lots of personal energy to invest, you're going to get there faster. If you're meditated and you're really dialed into your higher self and to your divine powers, it's going to go faster. If you've got a lot of stuff working against you, pushing back, people that don't want that goal to happen, or obstacles in the way of that goal, it's going to slow you down. Magic is only as good as the resistance that it hits and your ability to overcome that resistance. Another thing that is concerning is there are 2 places where magic goes to die. And one of them is talking it to death. You do the magic and you just talk and talk and talk and talk, put it on social media, go on Reddit, ask, did I do this right? And you're bleeding all the energy out of it in that direction by just talking it to death. Another one is a lack of faith or a feelings of doubt, where you're picking it apart in your mind. Gosh, what if I used a gold candle instead of a green candle for that prosperity spell? And I wonder if, gosh, should I have called in different angels to work on? If you start picking apart what you did, it's going to bleed the energy out. You have to be very present for your spell work. You have to be flexible for anything you channel during the spell work that might need to happen or be added or changed. But you also have to have faith in what you did. And here's the trick: walk away. Do your spell and then let it go. As soon as you do your spell, take a breath, wash your hands, and go do something mundane. Binge watch Bridgerton, wash the dishes, play with your kid, take your dog for a walk. Do something that's not magical to disconnect from that energy and let it do its thing so you are not worrying it to death. Think about planting a seed. When you plant a seed, there are weeks that go by where nothing happens. you're not seeing any results at all. If you get down in there and you start digging up that dirt, then you're going to find that your plant dies. So you have to make sure you're not digging up in doubt what you planted in faith. Plant it and let it go. If you're coming back later to feed more energy into the spell of the process, good for you. Do that. Keep that energy flowing, please. But do not obsess about it. One comment or one name for this is called the backdoor theory. It's nothing pervy, I promise. The idea is that if you keep checking the mailbox, it's because the mailman didn't come yet. You know why stuff is always in the last place you look? Because you stop looking after you find it, making that the last place. If you just keep bothering and bothering and bothering the spell work, looking out the window to see if it's walking up the drive to you, you're going to bleed the energy out of it. You need to have faith and just let it go and trust the process. And that, I think, is the hardest part of any spell work. Here's another one, magical laziness. I can't tell you how many reasonably good witches I know who want the magic to do all the heavy lifting. Well, I'm a witch, so why should I do anything mundane to make that happen? Well, because it's going to make it happen faster and better. As above, so below. The energy that comes from above needs to connect with energy down below, and part of you engaging that natural external world is doing all the things that need to happen to let that energy flow. Energy will follow the path of least resistance. If you create a path without very much resistance, your magic is going to hit home a lot faster. If you do a spell to get a job, but you don't fill out any applications, you don't fix your resume, you don't apply for any jobs, you're probably not going to get a job. Now, sure, somebody might say, hey, I'm looking for somebody to work my front office. Can you do that? It could happen, but it's more likely to happen if you do the mundane work. This is called working in accord. So magic creates the bridge to opportunity for success for your spell. You've still got to walk across that bridge to get to the other side. So do your mundane homework, and it's usually exactly what you think that it should be. So that's the human component of your magic that fuels that side of it. Point 5, again, timing and the path of least resistance. You know, sometimes the timing isn't right for a spell and the energy is blocked for some reason. If a spell fails, it could be that something's going on in your life that needs to happen before that can take place. So again, energy follows the path of least resistance. Spell's only as good as the resistance that it is able to overcome. If you want to buy a new house and you do spell work to buy a new house, but your credit is just crap, and you don't have a cosigner, and you don't have a down payment, that energy is going to have to work harder, and it's going to need more energy, and it's going to have to clear those obstacles before you can get your house. You're going to have to jump through a lot of hoops to make that happen. Whereas if you have credit that's just kissed by the Pope, and you have a quarter of the house payment or the house amount, the cost, in your bank account, you're going to get it pretty fast. Now, I'm not saying everybody has that, but that's just a comparison. You've got to do the work, and you want to allow time for energy to do the things it needs to do. So you're not going to say, I want to buy a house before the end of this month. I don't have anything to support that. I don't have a job, but I want to buy a house. You see what I'm saying? You're creating greater resistance than what that spell can overcome. So that spell is likely going to tank unless you support it and be patient with what it's doing. You know, I used to tell my daughter, who I adore, she's 33 now, but when she was 3 or 4 or 5, she had trouble understanding why she couldn't have what she wanted. And sometimes I had to tell her, look, sometimes the answer is just no. She needed me to explain it to her at length so she could argue every point and try to bend it into her getting what she wanted. And sometimes the answer is just no. And sometimes the universe overrides what you want to have happen and says no. You're praying for a door to walk through to get what you want. You're not recognizing that this door is leading off a cliff. Now, here's an example of that. I had a really painful divorce in the early 1990s from somebody I really loved. And I got to admit, he really messed up. And it was a really ugly divorce. And I prayed so hard, please let my husband come back. Please, please, I will do anything. I will offer anything. Just bring my husband back. And the universe said, no, you can't have that. And I was angry with my goddess. I was angry with the universe. And I realized a year later when I met my true soulmate and the person I was meant to spend my life with, that I never would have had those feelings and that experience with my first husband. So sometimes the universe just says no. It's divine intervention, the great no. And we want to adjust our human expectations. This is part of trusting that process. And our timelines, remember we talked about timelines, to work with the spell. And if it's no, sometimes it's just not yet. And sometimes it's wait for it. Wait for it. I know you wanted it this year, but next year, you're going to be really glad you waited. So sometimes it's no, but when it's no, it's almost always for your greater good. And the more that you can relax into that and say, oh, okay, it's been 6 months. I didn't get what I want. I guess that spell didn't land, but I trust the process. And then just do some road opener work. Do some my best life work. Do some gratitude work. Say, thank you for saving me from whatever was going to happen. That sounds very new agey, I know, but man, I've seen it over and over and over and over. So in conclusion, if you're finding your spell work isn't working, first, check your intention. Make sure your intention was worded the way you wanted and that you were really completely on board. Now, another thing that can trip you up is if some part of you is afraid of that goal manifesting. And that sounds contradictory, but sometimes you say that you really want love to come into your life when you're so afraid of being hurt again, that part of you works against it. Sometimes you're asking for this really amazing job, but there's some part of you that says, but I'm going to screw it up because it's outside of my skill set. So make sure you're in line with your intention and that your intention is clearly worded and a powerful sentence for you. Make sure your personal battery is charged. I'm going to be sort of capitalist here and say that if you need help with your spell work, crossroadsoccult.net is where I do my my spell work for clients. I also have a mentorship on my Patreon program, and I'll link to that in the description, where you immerse into magic with me to the level or tier that you choose. But make sure your personal battery is amped up or get somebody else to do the work on your behalf. Number 3, trust the process. Do your work and walk away. Think about it as Schrodinger's cat. If you know about that story, if you don't, disregard this. But when you do the spell is in the box. It's both fulfilled and denied at the same time until you actually see that spell happen. So just trust the process and let it happen. And number 4, do the mundane work. Make that happen. You gotta buy the ticket if you want to win the lottery. So if you want to go deeper on any of this, check out my Primal Witchcraft series. This is an on-demand class, and it's very affordably priced. And you can get that at crossroadsclasses.com. And if you want that magical community and that direct mentoring, I have all levels of mentorship. You can find that on my Patreon, which is linked in the description. So that's our extended class for this week. And those are the reasons why I have found in my experience that if your spell doesn't land, it's one of those things or a mixture of those things. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.